So moving on for our professional education, AI and the radical transformation of medicine. This is going to be another very exciting topic presented by David Moyer, and I'm going to give you his overview and bio. So actually, I'm going to skip just to the bio. While building a successful career as a management consultant, growing companies, and traveling the globe for clients, David and his wife lost several parents, step-parents, and two siblings, bringing into focus how little time we have together. As a result of these experiences and seeing others in the same situation, David studied the challenges of aging to help others through this journey. Throughout all aspects of aging, dementia had a significant impact on he and his family. With over 17 years of caring for parents with Alzheimer's, he has developed a deep understanding of causes, prevention, and care for those with these diseases. David is a certified senior advisor. He developed the complete caregiving toolkit that educates family members from starting the conversation with their parents through the end of life and beyond. The toolkit has 14 lessons covering essential aspects of caregiving, along with 30 assessments and worksheets to walk families through this journey. The result is that everyone knows what to expect and can make informed, confident decisions when that time comes. David also developed the CARE framework that provides families an overview of how to get the conversation started, assess the situation, build a roadmap, and continuing education. Lastly, David works with corporations to educate employees through a voluntary benefit employee assistance program, EAP. David, we're very excited to have you present for us this morning, and you may take it away.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can.
Okay, and see me, I'm assuming. So I need presenter rights so I
Yeah,
can present.
should be.
And while we're doing that, a little understanding of me. I am a product of a German father and an Italian mother, full-blooded. So I am extremely passionate about topics, but I have to get them right. So you'll see the Elder Honor piece is the passion. And what we're going to talk to you today about is artificial intelligence in healthcare. And
You should have presenter rights. We don't limit them.
okay.
I even made you co-host, so.
All right. Let me see. Can start sharing all participants.
Can you just put, if you hit the green, it's not working in its normal way?
Can you see my screen?
Mm-mm.
No, not yet. Let me go back. Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm not seeing the
Share button at the bottom.
post tools. Well, there's no share button on my side.
Odd. Any
Share
chance now?
notes. David is now co-host. Okay. So host tools.
You don't have a share button.
No, I don't.
All right. This is why you sent me what you sent me. All right. I will share. And there we go.
All right. So we're going to go through this pretty quick, and there is a lot of information on these pages, and I will walk you through each of it, but some of this is just reference material for you to take a look at afterwards. So if we go to the next page, we're going to go through a little history. How did we get here? I'll walk through what doctors are using in AI in hospitals, imaging, pharma, some about elder health care, the focus of this group, some cautions, what's next, and hopefully some time for QA. Next slide. So some recent headlines. I'll just read these. Global corporate AI investments reached $252 billion last year. That's $250 billion when you think about it. And this is corporate investments. This is the largest investment in a technology ever. And people are really sitting up and taking notice of this. And it's really going to change the way business and pretty much everything is going to happen from here on forward. And one of those examples is this next quote from Toby Lutke from Shopify. Using AI effectively is now a fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify. There's a link later on in this presentation for the exact quote, but essentially he's saying you need to know AI before we hire you and how to use it. And if we hire anybody else, you have to tell me why AI can't do that job. So that sent shockwaves through the technology industry. And that was just in April of this last 2 months ago. And then the last one here in May, the FDA announces completion of its first AI-assisted scientific review pilot and an aggressive agency-wide rollout timeline. So the FDA is receiving, truckloads of documents on everything that they have to certify and allow go into the Department of Agriculture, through the Department of Health, and all of those kinds of things. They just ran a pilot to review these documents using AI, and they successfully ran that pilot. And now their aggressive time frame is by the end of June this month, they're going to be using it for all of documents coming in to be FDA to receive FDA approval. So that's a huge shift in the way government looks at documents coming in that the FDA has to approve. So these are really earth-shattering shifts that are coming across in AI. So we'll go to the next slide. So how did we get here? I tell people it was gradually, then suddenly. And the example I give is every morning you walk into your bathroom and take a look at the mirror and, do what you need to do and then go on. And then there's a day where you see, oh, there's something different. There's a wrinkle there. And you just go on. And then there's another day where you say, oh my gosh, there's a gray hair there. Huh, look at that. But there's one day that you go in and look at yourself in your mirror and you go, what happened? I'm getting old. So that's the gradually versus and then suddenly. So the next slide I'm going to walk you through here. This is just for reference. This is my left brain speaking here to give you an idea of how this all happened. I'm only going to spend literally 30 seconds on this. So if you go back 150 plus years in the 1830s, I don't know when fire was invented, so I'm not sure. But Charles Babbage developed a mechanical analytical engine back in the 30s. And that's where things started happening with the Industrial Revolution and those kinds of things, where you started doing mechanics and doing the computers and started to think about things differently. And believe it or not, the first programmer, tell this to everybody you know, the first programmer in the world was a woman, and her name was Ada Lovelace. So she worked with Charles and programmed the analytical engine to get some results and figure out how to do computing on that. So I'm going to skip through a lot of these time frames and look at Alan Turing in the 1936, where you had the Turing test. This is the concept of being able to tell the difference between a computer response and a human response. And that test that from 1936 was just passed 2 years ago. So now you won't be able to tell the difference between a computer and a human response. And there's a lot of other things that go on. Here's some benchmarks for you, Microsoft and Apple. The World Wide Web, even though it was around in the 60s, It really became noticeable in the 1990s. And then you have computing resources like Deep Blue and beating Gary Kasparov on chess. And then a jump ahead to Google's neural network. And that's where you can see where Google, and Google has been driving a lot of this, can recognize images on YouTube. You jump ahead to the transformer architecture, which is really the basis for majority of this AI going on, and then NVIDIA with their GeForce chip, general graphical programming processing unit, a GPU. And then Chat 3.0 was released in 22, even though it was the first version was in 17. Last year, we came out with 1,000 apps per month, and now we're talking about AI agents to do pretty much program tasks. So we'll go to the next slide. Some definitions for you. Artificial intelligence has a bunch of things that it encompasses now, from machine learning, ML, to deep learning, DL, to solve problems, and includes large language models, which I'll talk about in a bit. So machine learning uses algorithms. 1 + 1 is an algorithm, and sets of rules to do things. So you've seen this because this is prediction engines. So people that watch this movie also watch that movie. People that bought this also bought that. People that listen to this also listen to this. That's machine learning. That's the programmatic language behind it. So that's where prediction comes from. And then recognition is also images and speeches and what's in videos. That's where the cat in videos. That's where Google started with that, because images are nothing more than lines that can be translated into algorithms. So they recognize those things. Now, deep learning is an extension of that to mimic the human brain. So it's a lot of neural networks. So the further we go down in artificial intelligence, the more advanced it becomes, because now we're using multiple networks that act like your brain to do this calculation. And then we also talk about training in artificial intelligence. We provided examples, say, look at this, tell me what it is. And look at that, and is that one thing or is it another thing? And that's supervised training. We also do unsupervised training in this. And then we do reinforcement training. So if you use GPTs at all, at the bottom of the screen, the response, there's a thumbs up little symbol underneath. If you press yes, that was a good response, you're reinforcing that GPT to say that was a good response. And all these things are being tested before releasing. Well, most of them are being tested. And to get this response right, there's always a human in the middle to take a look at that. So we'll go to the next slide. So large language models started being a big thing back in the late teens and early 20s. And this is literally the machines, the large language models, the AI, vacuuming up everything on the internet. And literally they called it hoovering up, which always is funny to me because Hoover is a vacuum. So they call it hoovering up everything on the internet, every article, every post, every submission to a document, every video, every text that's on there. They literally hoover it up and they store it in data banks or databases on the system. And the way they do that, next slide, is this concept called tokens and toggles. So words are divided into tokens, and you can see the example there. Fine tuning is fun for all. So each one of those words and pieces of words has a number associated with it, because computers can't do colors, they can't do volumes, they can't do images, they can do numbers, and that's what they can do. Everything goes back to a number. So they assign a number to it. So if you look at tuning there, tuning is broken up into tune and ing, because tune can be tundra, Tunisia, a bunch of things, depending on how it's used in the sentence. And these tokens are assigned to values, and the values are used in predicting the next word. So predictions of these tokens or values is used in creating words, and then words are sentences and sentence paragraphs and documents and on and on and on. So each model has a different probability assigned to it because they assign different weights to those tokens based on that particular model. And that weight is used to calculate the previous word and the potential, the prediction for the following words. So that's how large language models work. And that's where you get GPT, generative, pre-trained transformers. So that's how all of this thing, when you put in a question, it looks at the question that you asked it and then looks at predicting those things behind it and saying, okay, based on that question, I'm predicting that that answer needs to be this. And that's where you get hallucinations from, because in this example, tuning, it could be tuning, or if the calculation is wrong, we go to Tundra, and now you get a bunch of responses based on Tundra and not tuning. That's what a hallucination is. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, specific to healthcare, this is much better in a build slide on my PowerPoints, but let me walk you through this. So what they're doing is building, there are a handful of models that are healthcare specific. And this example is just a concept. This is not exactly how it works. It's just a concept to kind of get you aligned to it. So there's emergency room words that are part of an LLM. There's the Z's large language models. There's models around surgery. There's models around medications, and there's models around claims. So the way this would work is I go into an emergency room, and listening in the background is an AI being able to put all the words that are associated, that are being spoken about me and about the procedures being done to me, and grabbing those and putting them in a large language, or in putting them in a document. So it reaches into the disease or disorders. If I've got an infection that I'm in the ER for, or if I've got broken bones or something like that. And it follows me into surgery if I have to go to insert in surgery to do an emergency surgery. And while I'm in surgery, it's pulling all of those words out of the large language model for medications. And then when all of this stuff is done, then the claim model is pulling what was done in building the codes from the emergency room, the disease model, the surgery model, and the medication model, and then building that code system to be able to go to the payer, the provider, and as a patient summary when I leave the hospital or leave the ER, whatever was done to me. So we'll go to the next slide. If you have questions, just put them in the chat bot, and I'll try and get them as we go. Now, AI for doctors, this has really changed the way they do things, because now we can listen to the conversation, and it's called ambient listening. And a way to think about ambient listening is you're listening to my conversation now, but you also hear things in the background that's going on. So your spouse may say something to you and you hear it, but you're still listening to me. A better way to do that is when you go to a party and you and your spouse are talking to two different people, but your spouse says your name, you automatically can hear that name, your name that your spouse says. That's ambient listening. So the computers are listening in the background while your doctor is talking to you as a patient. It's transcribing that word for word, and it's recommending things to the doctor based on follow-up or questions or procedures or meds or referrals. And it summarizes that data and puts it into a format that you can put into the electronic medical record. And the vendors that are doing that on the right are on the right side. Nuance was Dragon Speech. They renamed it to Nuance, the second one down. And Microsoft bought Nuance a couple years ago and renamed it DAX. So we're going to look at one from Abridge, an example from Abridge, and a later example from NetGen. But the benefits of this is the physician, the clinician doesn't have to do all the clicking and clacking on the computer now. It saves them literally 2 or 3 hours a day. It reduces errors, all the errors, and increases diagnosis, and it integrates reminders and Clinicians are getting system-wide acceptance to this. The pilots that are being run now are done with 10 or 20 doctors, and within weeks, the other doctors are saying, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. So it's really getting system-wide acceptance pretty quick. We'll go to the next slide and I'll show you an example here. So let me walk you through this. On the right-hand side column is the actual transcription, word for word transcription. So you can see we're going to have to do, we're going to encourage you for or set you up for an appointment for an echocardiogram in an EKG. How does that sound? And the patient says, whatever needs to be done, thank you very much. And then it goes through that. So you can see that transcription there. And when the doctor looks at it, he can see it as it's going through. In the middle column is where the clinical note is. So the large language model and the machine learning engine behind it is building this clinical note behind this transcription in real time. So you have the standard SOAP procedures: subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. You can see the assessment and plan there as they're going through there. And then the physical example. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that this example was 36 minutes long, which is unheard of. And it's focused, the clinician is now focused on the patient. They don't have to worry about any coding or anything like that because it's already being built behind the scenes. And then they can copy it or they can send it directly to the electronic medical record. In this, in the middle slide, in the middle section, is the actual patient visit summary. When you walk out the door, that's what you're given. And on the right-hand side, the patient or the clinician can see their next patients and what's outstanding and what they need to do. So this has taken a 30-second review for the doctor to look at this at the end of your appointment, and then hitting yes, save, and send to the EMR versus 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 hours later going, okay, I need to remember who I saw and what I talked about and all of those kinds of things. So that's where the savings is coming, both in the documentation and the transcription times. Let's go to the next page. So this is an overview of Next Gen. So the patient encounter will start in the middle. The patient encounter on the right-hand side, that's what you saw. It's all documented. That's the SOAP notes. And encounter documentation, and all the coding now is done. So it's accurate coding. I don't know if you know this, but there's over 80,000 codes in the ICD-9 or ICD-10 now. In the ICD-11, which will be out soon, has 90,000 codes in it. So it can generate clean claims. A clean claim is one that isn't rejected by the payer, the insurance company. And they'll be rejected because they'll have simple ones like you can't have this code and that code in the same diagnosis. It has to be different codes. So these claims are now cleaner. And the post-visit is patient education can now be given out either in paper or over text, or now there's platforms that for PT, for example, you set your phone up and the camera is actually watching you do at-home PT physical therapy, and it can say, no, you need to bend further, knee replacements and hip replacements. This is already being done, where you need to bend a little deeper or stay there for a second longer kinds of things. And the pre-visit up in the upper right-hand corner is reviewing the medical history before the doctor actually comes in, or the PT therapist comes in and does the review. So all of this now is capable or now available for clinicians. Let's go to the next slide. And not to be left out, nursing. This is a company called Laudio, depending on where you're from. This does a lot of machine learning behind the scene, where you're looking at profiles and aggregating data from multiple systems. Those systems are not only the HR systems, but if you know nurses, nurses can go from floor to floor. you're on a ward or a floor, and then you go spend some time in the ER or go up into the ICU. So that's different coding because they're different pay rates. And then you have contracting nurses. So this thing is looking, the machine learning is looking at all this information in the background and saying, this nurse is working too many hours overtime. You need to pull them back or they're going to burn out. Or you're using this nurse in an ICU, but they don't have these credentials. So send them to these to get their certifications and things like that. So that's where these kinds of platforms are coming in. And on the right hand or left hand side, audits. Healthcare is a highly regulated industry, so they have to audit everything. So these are building automatic audits behind the scenes, so that they can submit these when they do their certifications and recertifications. We'll go to the next slide. I'm going to give you an example here of the Lancet. Well, this was a publication back in April. We'll just go to the next slide here. And I'll walk you through this slide. This is an electronic health record consolidation, an experiment done in the UK. The National Health Service was able to do this. National Health Service, healthcare in the UK is socialized medicine, so the government owns it. So they came up with this platform called Foresight, and this is an experiment. They pulled in 57 million patient records in 5 years of data across 3 hospitals, and it's all anonymized. So they pulled out all the patient healthcare identification, anything that can recognize you as a patient in this system. This was done previously with 7 million patients or in Denmark, but not to this extent. So this is a diagram of how they pulled the patient records in and documents per patient, and identified it and racked it and stacked it in the database for the diagnosis and the medications, and pulled in structured data. And that platform is called Foresight. Now, this is just an experiment, so I'll show you what this does on the next slide. We could go to the next slide here. So what we're doing here, what the Foresight application can do, is predict a patient's health. Now, I talked earlier on weights. So this is an example of weighting. So this particular example is a 64-year-old male, and they apply weights to this. So the memory impairment weight can be 0, or it can be 0.09. The reoccurring or the urinary incontinence can be 0 or 0.6. The cerebral weight can be 0 to 21. So that's what different models do, is they're assigning weight. How important is this? That's how you can think about it. So if they put in particular weights based on this model, they can now predict over on the right-hand side the type of diseases this person will have at 64. And if you look at the next graph below that, you can do this at 68 years, you can do this at 71 years and 74 years and 77. They can predict based on the symptoms, the diseases, and the medications. So I'll let that sink in for a second before the blood kind of comes out of your brain and goes to your feet. This is not new. Predictions are not new for machine learning. What is new is that we're applying it to medicine. I built a platform back in the late teens, mid-teens, where we could predict policing. So we pulled in 10 years of criminal data, and we were able to predict where crimes were going to happen at a particular location 24 hours in advance. Why is that? Because criminals are stupid. They do the same thing over and over again. So it had consistent predictability. So now they're doing the same thing with healthcare. So you get enough data, you can predict, because our bodies do the same thing. You get an infection, it fights it the same way. It's not different every other way. So on average, and this is average, you can now predict health. So the implications of that are are stunning when you think about it. And I won't go through that now because I got a bunch of other slides, but they're absolutely stunning in what you can do with that. So we'll go to the next slide. So clinical follow-up. I don't know, Dara, see if you can click on this slide and it'll take you to the link, or let me see if I can get you that link and put it in there. If not, it'll be in the, it doesn't sound like it's going to play, but I'll include that link in the notes. The site is hippocraticai.com. They have, this example is Rachel. It's an AI bot, and it literally calls a patient. This one has acute congestive heart failure, and it's a 3-day after discharge follow-up. So go to this site. You can find Rachel there on the site and just listen to it. It's about 15 minutes long, and it does all of these things on the left-hand side: identity verification, patient check-in, medication review. She goes in the lower left-hand side. You can see this Lasix, digoxin, Endopril. She goes through all of those, and the patient asks questions, and the AI bot, Rachel in this case, responds to it in real time. So, and that's possible because the large language model is pulling in and predicting the set of questions that the patient is going to ask, and is tightly integrated into the electronic medical record, and understands what medications are, and understands the questions that she's going to ask, and all of those other things. It's tightly coupled into those, and the response time on this is just stunning. We're talking in less than a second sometimes that this thing gets back and responds to her. So I encourage you to go up to it's hippocraticai.com, and then just pick one of those examples there. And you'll listen to, if you get this Rachel, it goes on for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's just amazing. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the other things that you've done in the past is you've given blood samples. And they're taking blood samples, or they're calling them now liquid biopsies, to the next order. And the reason they can do this, the reason they're doing this, is because your body sheds things all the time through fluids that you're excreting from your body. Everything from sweat to urine to blood to spit to saliva and all of those things. So what they're able to do now is take a look at DNA fragments and cell fragments. And again, this is machine learning. They're doing pattern matching before the symptoms are actually showing in your body. So they're doing this for cancer, and they're doing this for Alzheimer's, and they're doing this for several chronic diseases. They can see inflammation before it actually comes up and you start feeling inflammation in the joints or things. The Alzheimer liquid biopsy is right now, it's about 10 years ahead. So they can do this and predict that you'll have signs of Alzheimer's 10 years before you actually show Alzheimer's signs. And it's really amazing. Amazing and scary at the same time. So I'm not sure how many people would want to know that ahead of time, but there are medications that can slow that process down. Same with cancer. I mean, the earlier you get to know that, the better off you are. We'll go to the next slide. Here's an example of radiology. So if you know a radiologist, the picture on the right is pretty standard, where the radiologist is speaking into a microphone as they look at an image. They're actually dictating the impression on the image that they see. Well, AI, or large language models, again, is predicting what that impression, it's called an impression, might be by looking at the X-ray before the radiologist actually sees it, and predicts the image or the impression to the radiologist. So the radiologist looks at the image and looks at the pre-filled in impression of that image. So they can change it, update it, and approve it and move on to the next one. So it cuts down a lot of time that radiologists can see. And then we go to an extreme example on the next slide here. Imaging. Faster turnaround times, diagnostic accuracy improves, earlier detections of diseases, shortening the reading time. And this one is an interesting reduction of dose and contrast agents. Some people are allergic to contrast agents, when they're doing blood flow and things like that. So they can actually reduce it because the AI can pick up the contrast more than the human eye can. It's really amazing. Digital assistants provide this and it reduces burnout. And these are the vendors that are doing this. In the bottom one is one specific Pearl, which is a cute name for dental radiology and imaging. We'll go to the next slide as an extreme example here. So this is an example and the link is there and I provide it later on. Regina Barzilli is a PhD, is a doctor at MIT Jameel Health Center. So she went after lung cancer. And the thing with lung cancer is, if you have it, you have this persistent cough, you go to the doctor and does a quick diagnosis, sends it to sends you to get an x-ray, can't find anything, come back in 6 months. Your cough is going, it may get a little worse, go back to the doctor, come back, get another x-ray, I'm not sure, we don't see anything, the radiologist doesn't see anything, come back in 6 months. So a year later, you finally do a CT, the doctor says get a CT, and they don't see anything. So come back in 6 months and we'll do another CT. Well, this happens on and on and on. And it's usually 3 years into this where the CT will pick up or a radiologist will pick up what's going on in your lung. So what Regina and her team did at MIT Jameel Center was train the platform, the AI, and this is, again, machine learning. So it's looking at pattern recognition. She took 20,000 sets of these CTs and MRIs or scans. I don't remember there was a CT or an MRI. And train the system. That's with attention. So here's what it first looks like, the first one, and here's the last one where we can see something actually happening. And then she started looking at ones that were outside of the training system, and they were able to spot, the AI was able to spot lung cancer a year to 3 years ahead of it showing up where a human could see that. So it's just amazing where we can use AI to see these cancer cells long before they can be seen by a human eye. And it's, again, pattern recognition in training the model. She's now working on breast cancer and it'll move on from there. So let's go to the next slide. So pharma, this is a big market for AI in pharma. On average, it takes 12 years to get from the bench where the scientists are looking at what molecules they're going to put together for a new medication. And it costs between $1 billion to $3 billion, and cancer is $4.5 billion on average. A lot of these patents are going to expire in 2030. So the pharma industry as a whole is going to lose a lot of money as it goes to generics. That's almost 46% of their revenues. In new drug prices, I think the Adenabab for Alzheimer's is running at about $12,000 a month to $300,000 per year. So it's getting more and more expensive. And the federal government is looking at capping those costs. So let's go to the next slide. Let me show you what's going on here. So this is, you can look at this later on the left-hand side. They're color-coded. You can see from the bench time to clinical trials is usually about 5 to 7 years. The whole process takes 10 to 13 years. If you're not familiar with clinical trials, there's an explanation, a legend in the bottom right-hand corner there that I normally go through. But there's last year there was a company that did what normally takes 5 to 7 years in 46 days. And I'll go to the next slide and I'll show you that. Company's name is In Silico Medicine. So there's a company called DeepMind. It was based in the UK, and Google bought them about 3 years ago. So you can kind of think of them as an artificial intelligent chemist. They took all the possible molecules in the world and put them together to come up with all possible chemical combinations. So in silico was looking for a solution for pulmonary fibrosis. It's pulmonary is lung fibrosis, the scarring of the lungs. So in 21 days, they took a look at that database and they came up with 30,000 designs for molecules. Now to go through each one of those 30,000 to come up with that took a long time by hand. But then they went through and synthesized 6 of those models, and they tested 2 in cells. And the promising one was tested in mice, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And then they advanced it to 22 preclinical candidates in just 12 to 18 months. So they literally went from bench to clinical trials in 18 months. That's a year and a half. That cycle that I showed in the previous slide, 5 to 7 years, was cut down to a year and a half. And now they've got 30 drugs as candidates, in 10 of which have received FDA approval. It's just mind-boggling. And then Sandbox AQ is another one of those companies that are doing that, and I'll show you a bunch more. Next slide. So we're now getting into digital twins. Digital twins have been used in the manufacturing space for decades. So an example is that you have a motor that is spinning to create something, turning a fan, turning a gear, turning something. And they build a digital twin of that, and then they can stress test that motor. So they can run it faster, run it slower, put a heavier load on it, increase the operating temperature, decrease the operating temperature, and see where it breaks, see where the limits are. So now we're starting to do that with a digital twin for you and me. So that allows them to do medications against my digital twin. They have my genomes. They know what diseases I've had in the past. They can predict what I may have in the future. So now they can do all these chemical combinations to say, if I know the DNA of, this disease, a cancer, for example, let us try this chemical combination against that particular disease in the digital twin before they try it on me. So they know in the digital space whether it kills me or kills the disease before they actually try it on me. That is revolutionizing how they're doing these tests. And we'll go to the next slide.
So David, we are running short on time. We can keep going. I want to acknowledge that we might lose people. So anyone who can stay, we'll keep going so David can finish, but we do understand if they need to leave.
All right, I'll speed up here. So this gets into biology now, because this company called Somai that just just announced earlier this year, the FDA is phasing out animal testing. So the reason why, because other than killing all the mice and dogs and cats and things like that, is that when you test in animals, even though they're similar, they're not human tissue. So Somite has the ability now to create human tissues at scale. So they can take these embryonic structures. So as soon as your cell divides in the embryonic stage, you now have the ability to become any kind of cell in your body. It's the embryonic structure. That's a somite. That's that word. That's where it comes from. So now they're able to do cell replacement therapy. And they've built a platform called Delta Stem, as in stem cells. So now they can do step-by-step instruction or identify the types of cells that they can identify or build for testing. So they can replace and replenish any diseased or damaged cell. And the co-founder there, Micah Breckstone, there's a quote, "We're developing life language models instead of large language models." So these life language models can say, okay, I need this kind of tissue for the lung. I need it for the liver. I need it for the kidney or something like that to run the test against. Again, a digital test, and this gets into the physical test of those. We'll go to the next slide. Let's jump into elder care here. Elder care is going where we can monitor and manage healthcare remotely. Digital watches have been doing this for a while now. And you can see the different things that they can test there and monitor. There was a test done in 2009 in a long-term care facility where they put I don't recall the type of watch it was on 30 of their long-term care residents. And after 6 months, they were capable of predicting um, infections 9 days in advance because your respiration changes, your heart rate changes, your pulse rate changes, those kinds of things. So if you had 9 days in advance, notice that there is something going on in your system that would give you a lot of time to say, okay, let's do some preventative measures. And that data can now be sent to the doctor or your electronic medical record. So, and that was just a watch. So we'll go to the next slide here. So here are a bunch of applications that can be used to monitor families or elder care. Again, we're talking about elder care. Caregivers, the doctors and nurses can come up, and we've got our favorite one in the middle there. Bots can be used to listen in and understand changes in words like I'm doing now. The bot can say you're struggling with words and not sure what you're saying, and then flag that for a doctor or your caregiver and say, hey, there's something going on with your David in this case. He's struggling with words. That's an indication of something going on in the brain or maybe something else in the body. So listening in, and your phones can do that now. They're listening, but apps can do that to predict real-time access, give you collaboration on how to care for your loved one. We'll go to the next slide. To tell you, these 3 slides are just for references. AI is looking at small molecule drugs. In the upper right-hand corner, you see repurposing drugs. So these are off-label drugs. So now that they know all the molecules, they know what they can do inside of a body, they can test that digitally. So they're seeing if drugs have already been approved by the FDA, what else can these drugs do? You're already seeing that. You know a bunch of these already. In biological drugs, we'll go to the next slide. And again, these are just for reference. Platforms to target specific things in the body. There's a bunch of those. These are all startup companies, by the way. Protein engineering. I left out a slide that talks about proteins. Proteins are the fundamental building blocks. Enzymes are the fundamental building blocks in your body that build proteins, that build cell, that build DNA, that build you. So now we can manipulate the proteins in your body, and there's companies doing that. Design platforms and cell and tissue platforms for drug discovery, and on and on. We'll go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea of how many of these companies are doing this. All kinds of trials. When you do clinical trials, there's clinical trials for drugs take a long time and they're very expensive because there's a lot that you have to do. Just designing a protocol for a clinical trial is very difficult in optimizing those things. So there's a lot of companies that are building these so that you can find the right patient with the right kinds of diseases or non-diseases or comorbidities, additional things going on in their body, in learning how to do that. So there's a lot going on in the clinical development space and trials and testing trials and all the regulations around that. So it's just astounding. And these companies are only a year or 2 old. Go to the next slide. FDA has to approve all of these AI algorithms, and this is a list as of June of this year. And you can see that a majority of these are at the bottom, radiology, because that's where it first came out. This is 10 years old. Radiology has been out for 15 years. Sorry, what year am I in? But you can see that most of every area in healthcare is now being affected, or AI is being implemented somehow in an algorithm. So we'll go to the next slide. again, just for reference. A lot of healthcare organizations, a lot is going on. So these are some of the organizations. These are organizations that a lot of hospitals are involved in, a lot of clinicians are involved in. If you're interested in too for hospitals, I'd say look at the HAI. It's the Human Center for Artificial Intelligence. That's at Stanford. And the CHAI, CHAI. It's the Coalition for Healthcare in AI. Those are the ones that you can follow. International agreements, obviously, the EU and the World Health Organization and the US government and states are now getting into this. So this is getting really, really confusing for vendors trying to figure out this because there's so many different regulations that they have to stay in tune with. We'll go to the next slide. Now, some cautions here, what to consider. If you recall that picture of the Hoover vacuum, literally sucking up everything on the internet, everything comes up. Literally everything, all the good stuff, any article, any text, any picture, any image, any video. There's good stuff, there's bad stuff, there's really bad stuff. So these are machines, they're not humans. That's why the humans have to train the machines to understand what's going on. But every now and then, the bias will come out. And they're doing better and better on this, but still you may have bias. Hallucinations, we talked about. In the tuning example, instead of tuning, you might go to Tundra or Tunisia or something like that. That's a hallucination because the calculation and the weighting was different. It's not intentional, it's just a machine. Copyright laws. Everybody knows the way that they train these is to pull information that was probably copyrighted in the first place. So there's now a bunch of lawsuits going back and forth to try and figure this out. And the next one is false confidence. When you look at a radiologist, if and this is example just because it's in the deck here for everybody to look at, you can get false confidence in here. So you can say, yeah, that's right, it's right, it's right, it's right. And then all of a sudden something isn't right, but they assume that it is right. So that's false confidence. And liability concerns, they're still trying to figure out, you know, if the AI model recommends this and it's just approved automatically and something happens, a patient dies, a patient gets sicker, a patient gets a new disease, who's liable for that? You know, the US is a very litigious country, so somebody has to pay for that. So they're trying to figure that out. Data management is really important because you have to have clean data, and a lot of companies aren't set up for this. Healthcare is awash in data, and this is a big problem for them. And leaked proprietary data, people using AI may leak company data, and in healthcare may leak patient information on an open platform, which is not good. Government involvement, I talked about briefly here. More government, more regulations, and it just means that everybody has to pay attention to this more time, spend a lot of more time paying attention to this. And then the race to build the next model. These models are coming out every 3 to 6 months. And the issue here is that if you've built a platform, a clinical platform on one model and the new model comes out in 6 months, you have to now go back and take a look at that new model and see what's different and incorporate that new model or wait for the next model to come out. And the issue with that is you fall behind because the next person behind you is coming up really quick. So these are the cautions that everybody needs to pay attention to from beginner all the way up to the executives and people starting up. We'll go to the next slide. So what's next? Usually I spend a minute here on asking whether this is artificial intelligently generated image, and it is not. This is Elon Musk launched this car into space, and this is a camera that he mounted to his car to take this in real time. And if you're really interested in following that link, there's a link in the in the notes here. So we'll go to the next slide. What's next? And these are my predictions based on just briefly what I've gone through in the last 45 or 50 minutes here. Home health is going to change everything. And it's not home health like we think of home health today. Because I can measure everything at home, I will now be able to see diseases long before they show up, or I can take notice of them. So watches have been doing this for a long time. The diagnosis is going to happen earlier. I can get personalized healthcare before things happen. So the longer health span is going to be longer. And for home health, you're going to see robots coming in here. There's several companies that think this is a huge market space. There's a company called Figure. It's at figure.com. Pay attention to those guys. Tesla has their own robot. Pay attention to those guys. So for health systems, the integrated delivery networks are going to get more integrated and more delivery, probably at home. Their expansions of telehealth and virtual health will happen. And it's going to be inpatient load is going to be reduced. So they're not doing small things. It'll be when you're in the hospital, it'll be major events now, accidents, but major diseases. Those disease loads will reduce because you'll be catching them much, much earlier. And bots will take over the front door. Front door means that you'll be talking to AI robots before you actually talk to a clinician. So you'll talk to your phone. The AI robot, if you go back up to hippocraticai.com, you'll see what those robots are capable of doing. In the pharma space, instead of 10 or 15 years for drug development, it'll be 2 to 5 years. We'll get rid of orphan diseases because now the costs will drop and you'll have global access to all of those companies or those medications. Insurance companies, I literally have no idea. There's so much going on and so much happening in insurance companies. I don't have any idea. I think all costs will drop across healthcare. The costs will drop. I don't know that the pricing will drop based on that. So that's the difference. And we'll need less general practitioners, nurses, and administrations. The reason I can say that is because just look at that example, the hippocraticai.com. Nurses have to do those follow-up. If you can have bots doing that just as well, or sometimes better, or GPs doing that just as well, or sometimes better, then that space requirement goes down. Go to the next slide.
David, you somehow got muted. Can you unmute? There you
Okay,
go.
am I back? Yes? We good? Okay. So get in the game. Learn AI. Just pick an app. I don't. All of them are free or you can get a $20 a month one. But pick one and start learning it. Learn how to prompt it. Um, Build a custom GPT. Learn Google's Notebook large language model, and then use deep research on these things. Deep research is free. It'll alter how you think about what you're doing in AI. In the next slide, we'll have some examples, some links there. I'll pull out the links on the next slide. If you want to move up, Tara, those are the links there that you can have. You just click on those and it'll take you where those things, where you can start learning more about those things. And then that's it. And I'll end there on the last slide here. Any questions? My company is Elder Honor. We talked about that. And then I have another company where I talk specifically about artificial intelligence, and that is Regulus.digital. And those are my phone numbers there, and ways to contact me. So that's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or you can reach out and give me a call or send me an email.